I never imagined that sitting alone in the front row of Stanford University's commencement ceremony, watching my classmates celebrate with their beaming families while my phone displayed 17 unanswered calls to my parents, would become the catalyst that transformed me from an overlooked daughter into the founder of a scholarship empire that would make headlines across every major news network in America. Even less could I have anticipated the look of absolute shock on my father's face when he discovered that the little hobby project he'd dismissed for years had just been valued at $50 million by the Department of Education. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But that moment of devastating isolation, surrounded by thousands of celebrating families while mine couldn't be bothered to attend the culmination of 4 years of academic excellence, became the foundation that not only revolutionized educational access for underprivileged students, but transformed me from someone who begged for attention into a woman who commanded respect on a national stage. The morning of my Stanford graduation dawned with the kind of perfect California sunshine that makes everything look like a movie set. All golden light and cloudless skies. I stood in my cramped Palo Alto apartment, carefully adjusting my cap and gown in the mirror, practicing the smile I'd wear when I walked across that stage. The emerald green honor cords draped around my shoulders represented 4 years of academic excellence, graduating summa cum laude with a double major in computer science and social impact. More importantly, they represented 4 years of proving myself worthy of notice, of love, of pride from the family who had somehow always found me lacking. My reflections stared back at me with dark eyes that had inherited my grandmother Elena's determination, though I didn't know it yet. At 22, Sophia Martinez carried herself with the quiet confidence that comes from achieving everything through your own effort, though beneath that composure lived a young woman still desperately seeking validation from people who had never learned how to give it. My black hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon that had taken me 3 YouTube tutorials to master, because asking my mother for help with such things had long ago proven pointless. The phone buzzed on my nightstand with a text from my mother. Patricia Martinez. Running late with the catering prep for Mrs. Valdez's anniversary party. We'll try to make it. So proud of you, sweetheart. The message included a heart emoji, as if that small digital symbol could compensate for the growing certainty that I would be walking across that stage alone, just as I had navigated most of my significant achievements. Patricia Martinez owned Martinez Catering, a successful business that had grown from her mother Elena's small tamale operation into a premier event company serving Orange County's elite. My father, Roberto Martinez, had built Martinez Construction from a single truck into one of Southern California's most respected commercial builders. Together, they had created a financial empire that afforded our family a beautiful home in Newport Beach, luxury cars, and social status within the Latino business community. What they had never managed to create was time for their youngest daughter's accomplishments. My older brother Carlos, the golden child who had inherited both businesses and all parental attention, had graduated from USC 5 years earlier with a business degree and a celebration that filled the Ritz-Carlton ballroom with 300 guests. My sister Maria, the family beauty who had married well and produced the first grandchildren, had received a wedding that was featured in Orange County magazine. I was the unexpected third child, born when my parents were already established and busy, the daughter who excelled academically while they built business empires, the one who spoke fluent Mandarin and Python coding language, but somehow never learned how to capture their sustained attention. The irony wasn't lost on me that I had chosen Stanford partially to prove myself worthy of the pride they so easily showed for my siblings, and partially to escape the suffocating feeling of being perpetually overlooked in my own family. 4. Years of academic excellence later, I was still waiting for them to notice who I had become, rather than focusing on who they thought I should be. As I applied the last touch of lipstick, my phone rang with Carlos's name on the screen. My heart lifted momentarily, thinking perhaps he was calling to wish me luck or confirm arrival details. Instead, his voice carried the practiced charm he used when delivering disappointing news. "Hey, Soph. Congratulations on today. Really wish I could be there. But we've got this major client presentation for the Laguna Beach Resort project. Dad insisted I handle it personally since it could be worth millions to the company." The familiar weight of being secondary to business. Priorities settled in my chest like a stone. "Of course," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the disappointment. "I understand completely. Business comes first." The words carried more truth than Carlos would ever recognize. In the Martinez family hierarchy, business had always come first, family obligations second, and my individual achievements somewhere near the bottom of a very long list. "You know how proud we all are of you, though, right?" Carlos continued, his tone carrying the guilty edge that meant he recognized the inadequacy of his excuse. "Stanford graduation. That's huge. Mom and Dad are always bragging about their daughter, the computer genius." The words rang hollow because I knew they were true in theory, but meaningless in practice. Pride expressed in my absence to friends and business associates meant little when it couldn't motivate actual attendance at the events that mattered to me. After ending the call, I sat on my narrow bed, looking around the apartment that had been my sanctuary for 4 years. Unlike my childhood bedroom in Newport Beach, which my mother had decorated in pastels she thought appropriate for a young lady, this space reflected my actual personality. The walls displayed my computer science awards, photographs from coding competitions, and acceptance letters to graduate programs I was considering. My desk overflowed with technical manuals, research papers, and the legal documents related to the project that had consumed my free time for the past 2 years. That project, which my family dismissed as a computer hobby, had actually evolved into something extraordinary, though they had never bothered to ask for details beyond polite surface-level questions. What began as a simple website to help first-generation college students navigate financial aid applications had grown into a comprehensive platform, connecting underprivileged students with scholarship opportunities, mentorship programs, and academic support networks. The scholarship database alone contained over 15,000 opportunities I had personally researched and verified, while the mentorship network included over 3,000 volunteers from major tech companies, universities, and professional organizations. More significantly, the platform had begun generating substantial revenue through partnerships with companies seeking to diversify their recruitment pipelines and foundations looking to distribute educational grants more effectively. The financial statements showed consistent monthly growth that had accelerated dramatically over the past 6 months, though I had been too focused on graduation requirements to fully analyze the implications. My parents, when they bothered to ask about my extracurricular activities, seemed to think I was playing around with website design rather than building something that was already impacting thousands of lives and generating serious money. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The morning sun shifted higher as I gathered my graduation materials, checking and rechecking that I had everything needed for the ceremony. My phone displayed no new messages from my parents, though a quick check of my mother's Instagram showed fresh posts about the Valdez anniversary party preparation, complete with photos of elaborate floral arrangements and mentions of how honored Martinez Catering was to serve such distinguished clients. The post included hashtags about family legacy and Mexican-American business success, the kind of public pride that never seemed to extend to my academic achievements. Standing at my apartment window, looking out at the Stanford campus where I had spent the most formative years of my life, I made a decision that felt both frightening and liberating. I would stop waiting for my family to recognize my worth and start building a life where their validation was unnecessary rather than essential. The graduation ceremony would mark not just the end of my undergraduate studies, but the beginning of genuine independence from the emotional patterns that had shaped my first 22 years. The drive to Stanford campus took 40 minutes. Through Silicon Valley traffic, giving me time to mentally prepare for walking across that stage without familiar faces in the audience cheering my name. I had invited my roommate's family to attend, and they had graciously accepted, understanding the dynamics that left me celebrating alone. Sarah Chen's parents, who had emigrated from Taiwan and built successful careers in biotechnology, had welcomed me into their family celebrations throughout college, with the kind of warmth my own family reserved for business associates and potential clients. The Chens understood the unique pressure faced by children of successful immigrants who were expected to honor family sacrifice while forging their own paths in competitive academic environments. Unlike my parents, who viewed my technological interests as a phase to be outgrown in favor of joining the family businesses, Sarah's parents recognized intellectual achievement as valuable in its own right, regardless of immediate financial returns. Their support had provided a glimpse of what family encouragement felt like, making the absence of my own family's investment even more pronounced. As I parked near the ceremonial hall, my phone rang one final time before I would need to silence it for the ceremony. Roberto Martinez's voice filled the car, carrying the hearty confidence that had made him successful in construction and utterly clueless about his youngest daughter's emotional needs. "Mija, congratulations on your big day. Your mother and I are so sorry we can't be there, but this anniversary party is really important for business connections. You understand how these things work." The casual assumption that I would understand and accept their absence with good humor sparked something dangerous in my chest. For 4 years, I had been understanding about missed parent weekends, skipped award ceremonies, and postponed family dinners that were inevitably rescheduled around business priorities. I had been the accommodating daughter who never complained when Carlos's achievements warranted family gatherings, while mine warranted brief phone calls and promises to celebrate. Later, that never materialized. "I understand perfectly, Dad," I replied, and for the first time in my life, I truly meant it. I understood that their priorities were exactly what they had always been, that I ranked somewhere below business networking on their list of important things, and that waiting for them to change was a waste of emotional energy I could better invest elsewhere. "I hope the party is everything Mrs. Valdez wants it to be." "That's my girl," Roberto said, missing the edge in my tone entirely. "We'll take you out for a nice dinner next week to celebrate properly. Maybe that place in Newport with the good steaks." The offer of a future celebration felt like a consolation prize, a way to acknowledge the inadequacy of missing today while avoiding any real commitment to prioritizing my achievements over business convenience. After ending the call, I sat in my car for several minutes, processing the complex emotions that swirled through my chest. Disappointment had evolved into something sharper and more productive. Anger had crystallized into determination. The sadness I had carried for years about never being enough to capture their sustained attention had transformed into resolve to build something so significant that their opinion would become irrelevant to my sense of self-worth. Walking across the Stanford campus toward the graduation ceremony, I felt the symbolic weight of transition more powerfully than most of my classmates who saw today as one milestone among many they would share with supportive families. For me, this moment represented the end of seeking validation from people who had consistently demonstrated their inability to provide it, and the beginning of creating value systems where my contributions would be recognized and celebrated. The ceremony staging area buzzed with excited energy as nearly 2,000 graduates gathered in alphabetical order, adjusting caps and gowns, while family members took countless photographs. The contrast between my solitary preparation and the family clusters surrounding most of my classmates could have been devastating. But instead, I found myself observing the dynamics with anthropological curiosity. What did it feel like to have parents who traveled across the country for your achievements? How did it shape your self-confidence to grow up knowing your family would prioritize your milestones over business opportunities? Sarah Chen found me in the staging area, her own family having arrived 2 hours early to secure optimal seating and photographic angles. "My parents saved seats for you at dinner tonight," she said, straightening my honor cords with the efficiency of someone who understood ceremonial importance. They specifically requested that we celebrate your achievements too, since they've been following your scholarship platform progress and think it's incredible. The generosity of her family's inclusion touched something deep in my chest, highlighting the contrast between chosen family who celebrated my actual accomplishments and biological family who remained oblivious to what I had built. Sarah's parents had attended my platform demonstration presentations, asked detailed questions about my technical architecture decisions, and expressed genuine pride in my work's social impact. They understood my project's significance in ways my own parents had never bothered to explore. "Thank you," I replied, meaning it completely. "That means more than you know." The words carried weight because I was only beginning to understand how much the Chen family's support had sustained me through the lonely aspects of college life, where family involvement was expected and assumed. Their recognition had provided a model for what encouragement looked like, making my own family's indifference more visible by contrast. As we moved toward our assigned seats, I caught sight of the Chen family in the audience, waving enthusiastically and holding a sign with both Sarah's and my name in glittery letters. The sight sparked unexpected tears, not from sadness, but from gratitude for people who had chosen to include me in their celebrations without obligation or expectation. Their presence transformed what could have been a day of isolation into an experience of genuine community support. The ceremony itself unfolded with the pomp and circumstance that Stanford had perfected over decades of graduating some of the world's most accomplished students. As our row approached the stage, I felt my phone vibrate with what I assumed would be last-minute well-wishes from extended family or friends. Instead, the message was from an unknown number with a Washington, D.C. area code, marked urgent and requesting immediate callback regarding my scholarship platform. The timing seemed surreal, receiving a mysterious business call moments before walking across the stage to receive my diploma. I made a mental note to return the call after the ceremony, assuming it was probably another foundation interested in partnership opportunities or a university seeking to license our database for their students. Such inquiries had been increasing steadily over the past few months as word spread through educational circles about our platform's effectiveness in connecting students with funding opportunities. When my name was called, I walked across that stage with my head held high, hearing enthusiastic cheers from the Chen family section, and feeling genuinely proud of what I had accomplished independently. The diploma in my hands represented not just academic achievement, but 4 years of building something meaningful while my family focused on their established priorities. The symbolism felt perfect, receiving recognition for work I had done, without their support, in front of people who had chosen to celebrate my success. After the ceremony concluded and photographs were taken with Sarah and her family, I stepped away to return the urgent call from Washington. The voice that answered belonged to Dr. Jennifer Walsh, Deputy Director of Educational Innovation at the Department of Education. Her tone carried the kind of professional excitement that suggested significant news rather than routine inquiry. "Ms. Martinez, thank you for returning my call on your graduation day. I hope the ceremony was everything you hoped for." Her warmth seemed genuine, though I detected underlying urgency that suggested this call involved more than congratulations. "I'm reaching out because our department has been conducting a comprehensive analysis of private educational platforms that are making significant impact on college access and success rates." My heart rate accelerated as I realized this conversation might involve federal attention to my project, though I couldn't yet determine whether that represented opportunity or potential regulatory concern. "I appreciate your interest in our work," I replied carefully. "We've been focused on creating sustainable pathways for first-generation college students to access funding and support networks. That's exactly why I'm calling," Dr. Walsh continued, her excitement becoming more evident. "Your platform has been flagged by our analytics team as one of the most effective college access tools currently operating in the private sector. The data on student outcomes, scholarship distribution efficiency, and mentor engagement rates is remarkable. we'd like to discuss a potential partnership that could significantly scale your impact. The conversation that followed transformed my understanding of what I had actually built over the past 2 years. According to federal analysis, my scholarship platform had facilitated over $12 million in educational funding for students who otherwise would have had limited access to such opportunities. The mentorship network had a 93% retention rate and had been directly linked to improved academic performance among participating students. Most significantly, the platform's algorithm for matching students with appropriate opportunities had proven more effective than existing federal systems. The Department of Education is prepared to offer a substantial partnership agreement, Dr. Walsh explained, that would involve licensing your technology for federal use while maintaining your private operations. The preliminary valuation for such a partnership would be approximately $50 million, with ongoing revenue sharing that could multiply that figure significantly over time. The words hit me like physical force: $50 million. For the project my family had dismissed as a computer hobby, for the work I had done alone in my dorm room and later in my apartment, motivated by memories of my own struggles navigating financial aid applications without family guidance who understood the system. The platform that had evolved from personal frustration into a comprehensive solution had apparently created value that exceeded anything I had imagined possible. Dr. Walsh continued outlining the partnership terms, including provisions for maintaining my leadership role while expanding to serve students nationally, but I found myself struggling to process the magnitude of what she was describing. The shy young woman who had started college hoping to earn her family's pride had apparently built something that commanded federal attention and 8-figure valuations. After ending the call, I sat in my parked car for nearly an hour, staring at the notes I had scribbled during our conversation. The numbers seemed impossible, but Dr. Walsh had been specific about the federal analysis methods and the partnership terms being proposed. According to the Department of Education, my little hobby project had created more measurable impact on college access than most established nonprofits with decades of operation and millions in traditional funding. The irony felt overwhelming. While my family had been building their business empires through traditional construction and catering services, I had accidentally created something that addressed a national crisis in educational access. While they had been focused on serving Orange County's elite through luxury events and commercial development, I had been connecting disadvantaged students across the country with opportunities that would transform their entire life trajectories. Most significantly, I had built something that commanded respect and recognition from people who understood its value, rather than continuing to seek acknowledgement from family members who had never bothered to learn what I was actually doing. The federal partnership offer represented validation on a scale that made my parents' absence from graduation feel insignificant by comparison. As the afternoon sun began to fade, I drove back to my apartment with a sense of anticipation, rather than the disappointment I had expected to feel about celebrating alone. The graduation ceremony had marked the end of my undergraduate studies, but Dr. Walsh's call had revealed that my real education was just beginning. The platform I had built while waiting for my family to notice my potential had apparently created a foundation for impact that extended far beyond personal achievement. The evening dinner with the Chen family transformed into an impromptu business consultation as I shared the details of my conversation with the Department of Education. Sarah's father, Dr. Michael Chen, had experience with federal research partnerships through his biotechnology work and helped me understand the significance of being approached directly by the Department of Education rather than having to compete through traditional grant application processes. This level of federal interest suggests your platform has solved something they've been unable to address through existing programs, he explained over dim sum that Mrs. Chen had ordered from our favorite restaurant. Educational access is a massive federal priority, and if they're offering partnership rather than attempting to replicate your work internally, it means you've created something genuinely innovative. Sarah herself, who had been accepted to medical school and understood competitive academic environments, helped me process the emotional aspects of building something significant while feeling overlooked by my own family. You've been carrying this incredible achievement while thinking your family didn't recognize your potential, she observed. But maybe the real issue is that they never understood what you were building because it was so far beyond their frame of reference. Her insight sparked a realization that had been developing throughout the day. My parents weren't deliberately dismissive of my achievements, so much as they were operating within business models they understood based on their own experience. Construction and catering were tangible services with clear metrics and immediate returns. A technology platform that addressed systemic educational inequity through algorithm-driven matching systems was simply outside their conceptual framework for what constituted valuable work. That understanding didn't excuse their absence from my graduation or their consistent prioritization of business obligations over my milestones, but it provided context that made their behavior less personally devastating. They weren't rejecting me specifically. They were failing to recognize the significance of work that didn't fit their established patterns for measuring success and importance. As the evening progressed, I found myself feeling genuinely excited about returning Dr. Walsh's call the following week to begin formal partnership discussions. The federal opportunity represented a chance to scale the impact I had been creating one student at a time into a system that could transform educational access for millions of young people, facing similar barriers to those I had experienced. More personally, the partnership offer had shifted my relationship with my family's approval from essential to optional. Their recognition would always be meaningful, but it was no longer necessary for my sense of self-worth or professional direction. I had apparently built something valuable enough to command federal attention and eight-figure valuations, which provided a foundation of external validation that made their opinions less crucial to my emotional well-being. Driving back to my apartment that night, I reflected on how dramatically my perspective had changed in the span of a single day. This morning, I had been a graduating student, hoping her family would prioritize her achievement over business obligations. Tonight, I was an entrepreneur who had received a $50 million partnership offer from the federal government for work she had accomplished independently. The transformation felt symbolic of a broader shift that had been developing throughout my college years. I had entered Stanford seeking to prove myself worthy of my family's pride and attention. I was leaving with the realization that I had built something meaningful regardless of their recognition, and that my future impact would be determined by my own choices rather than their approval. As I prepared for bed, I looked around my apartment, one final time as an undergraduate student. Tomorrow, I would begin a new chapter as someone who had captured federal attention for addressing a national crisis through innovative technology. The shy young woman who had started college hoping to earn her family's pride had evolved into someone who commanded respect based on measurable impact rather than family connection. The graduation day that had begun with disappointment about my family's absence had ended with the discovery that I had built something far more significant than I had ever imagined possible. The federal partnership offer represented not just financial opportunity, but validation that the work I had done alone in my dorm room had created value that extended far beyond personal achievement into genuine social impact. Most importantly, I had learned that the most meaningful recognition comes from people who understand the significance of your work, rather than from family members who love you but fail to comprehend what you're actually doing. The Department of Education's interest in my platform provided the kind of professional validation that made my parents' absence feel less like rejection and more like their limitation in recognizing value outside their established expertise. As sleep approached, I felt genuinely optimistic about the future for the first time in years. Not because I had finally earned my family's attention, but because I had discovered that their attention was no longer necessary for my sense of purpose or professional direction. The platform I had built had apparently created its own momentum, and my role was to guide that momentum toward maximum impact, rather than seeking approval from people who had never learned how to provide it effectively. The following Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp Los Angeles air that made everything feel possible, though I woke in my Stanford apartment with the surreal knowledge that my life had fundamentally changed over the weekend. The federal partnership offer from Dr. Walsh felt both thrilling and terrifying, as I prepared for what would likely be my final week in Palo Alto before transitioning to whatever came next. My laptop displayed 17 new emails from the Department of Education's legal team, each containing documents that reinforced the magnitude of what I had apparently accomplished without fully realizing it. The preliminary partnership agreement ran 47 pages of legal terminology that would have been incomprehensible 6 months ago, but my business law courses had provided enough foundation to understand the essential terms. The federal government was offering to license my platform's core technology for national deployment, while allowing me to maintain ownership of the private operations. The $50 million figure represented initial compensation, with revenue-sharing agreements, that could generate substantially more over time as the platform scaled to serve millions of students nationwide. What struck me most powerfully was how the federal analysis described my work in language that my family would never use. Terms like innovative algorithmic matching, measurable impact on educational equity, and scalable solution to systemic access barriers appeared throughout the documents. The platform I had built while feeling overlooked by my own family was being evaluated by federal experts as groundbreaking technology that addressed critical national priorities. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother asking if I wanted to join the family for lunch on Tuesday to celebrate my graduation belatedly. The message included several heart emojis and mentions of my favorite restaurant, the kind of gesture that would have thrilled me just weeks earlier. Now, however, the timing felt almost comically inadequate, given what had developed since they chose to prioritize Mrs. Valdez's anniversary party over my commencement ceremony. Instead of responding immediately, I decided to call Dr. Walsh to discuss the next steps in the federal partnership process. Her assistant connected me within minutes, suggesting that my project had indeed captured significant attention within the Department of Education hierarchy. When Dr. Walsh came on the line, her enthusiasm was even more evident than during our initial conversation. "Ms. Martinez, I'm so glad you called. We've had preliminary discussions with our technology integration team, and the excitement level here is remarkable. Your platform addresses challenges we've been struggling with for years through traditional federal programs." Her voice carried the kind of professional satisfaction that comes from discovering solutions to persistent problems. "I'd like to arrange for you to visit Washington next week to meet with our senior leadership team and begin formal partnership negotiations." The invitation to Washington felt like entering an entirely different category of professional recognition than anything I had previously experienced. Federal partnerships weren't opportunities that came to recent college graduates through typical career pathways. They represented the kind of impact that established professionals spent decades working toward. Yet, somehow, my late-night coding sessions and database research had accidentally created something that commanded this level of attention. "I'd be honored to visit Washington," I replied, though part of me still struggled to believe this was happening to the same person who had sat alone at her graduation ceremony 3 days earlier. "What should I prepare for these meetings?" The question felt inadequate for the magnitude of what was being discussed, but I genuinely had no framework for understanding how federal partnerships operated or what would be expected of me. Dr. Walsh outlined a comprehensive agenda that included technical demonstrations of my platform's capabilities, presentations on impact measurement methodologies, and strategic discussions about scaling challenges for national deployment. The federal team wanted to understand not just what I had built, but how I had approached problems that had stymied their existing systems and what insights might be applicable to other educational initiatives. "We're particularly interested in your matching algorithm," she explained. "Our current federal aid systems rely primarily on financial need assessments, but your platform incorporates academic potential, career interests, and institutional fit factors that have proven remarkably effective at predicting student success. That holistic approach represents a significant advancement over traditional funding distribution methods. The conversation reinforced something I was beginning to understand about the disconnect between my family's perception of my work and its actual significance. My parents had dismissed my platform as a computer hobby because they evaluated it through the lens of immediate financial returns and tangible business metrics they understood from their construction and catering enterprises. Federal education. Experts, however, recognized it as innovative technology that addressed systemic problems they had been unable to solve through conventional approaches. After ending the call with Dr. Walsh, I spent several hours reviewing my platform's analytics to prepare for the Washington meetings. The data revealed patterns I hadn't fully appreciated while building the system incrementally over 2 years. Students who found scholarships through my platform had a 96% college retention rate compared to national averages in the low 70s. The mentorship matching system had facilitated over 50,000 successful mentor-student relationships that continued well beyond the initial scholarship application process. Most significantly, the platform had begun to generate substantial revenue through corporate partnerships with companies seeking to diversify their talent pipelines and foundations looking for efficient distribution mechanisms for educational grants. The business model had evolved naturally from a simple database into a comprehensive ecosystem that created value for multiple stakeholder groups while maintaining focus on student outcomes. These metrics represented the kind of measurable impact that commanded federal attention and 8-figure valuations. Yet, when I had tried to share excitement about user growth and retention rates with my family over holiday dinners, their polite interest quickly shifted to discussions about Carlos's latest construction projects or Maria's children's school activities. They had never dismissed my work intentionally, but they had never engaged with it seriously enough to understand what I was actually building. The realization sparked a complex mixture of emotions that I was still processing. Disappointment that my own family had missed the significance of my most important achievement. Relief that their opinion no longer felt essential to my sense of professional validation. Excitement about opportunities that were emerging based on merit rather than family connection. And surprisingly, a growing confidence that I had built, something genuinely valuable regardless of their recognition or approval. By Tuesday morning, I had decided to decline my mother's lunch invitation in favor of focusing on preparation for the Washington meetings. The timing felt symbolic rather than petty. For years, I had rearranged my schedule to accommodate family. Gatherings where my achievements were acknowledged briefly before conversation moved to topics my parents found more engaging. Now, I had federal meetings that required my full attention and preparation time that was more valuable than belated celebration lunches. My response to Patricia's invitation was carefully worded to avoid unnecessary drama while establishing new boundaries around my availability. Thank you for the invitation, Mom. I'm actually traveling to Washington, D.C. this week for meetings with the Department of Education about my scholarship platform. Perhaps we can celebrate when I return and can share more details about these exciting developments. The message was designed to accomplish multiple objectives. First, it declined the lunch invitation without appearing ungrateful or dismissive. Second, it introduced the concept that my computer hobby had attracted federal attention, though I suspected my parents would need more context to understand the significance. Third, it established that my schedule now included priorities that took precedence over family social gatherings, a boundary I had never previously maintained. Patricia's response came within an hour, demonstrating the kind of prompt attention she typically reserved for business communications rather than family matters. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. We're so proud of your computer work getting government attention. Let us know when you're back and we'll plan something special. The message included multiple celebration emojis, but also revealed how little she understood about what I had actually accomplished or what federal partnership opportunities entailed. The casual reference to computer work getting government attention highlighted the vast gap between my family's perception and the reality of what was developing. They seemed to imagine that some federal office had noticed my website and wanted to offer encouragement or perhaps a small grant for continued development. The concept that I had built technology worth $50 million to the federal government remained completely outside their framework for understanding my capabilities or the significance of my work. Rather than attempting to correct their misconceptions through text messages, I decided to wait until after the Washington meetings to provide comprehensive information about what the partnership actually involved. Their response to that news would reveal whether they were capable of recognizing my achievements when presented with undeniable evidence of their significance, or whether their dismissiveness reflected deeper limitations in their ability to understand value they hadn't directly helped create. The flight to Washington represented my first business travel experience, a surreal transition from being a college student whose parents couldn't attend graduation to being a professional whose work commanded federal attention. As the plane lifted off from San Francisco, I reflected on how dramatically my circumstances had changed in less than a week. The shy young woman who had walked across the Stanford stage alone was now traveling to the nation's capital to discuss partnerships that could impact millions of students and generate eight-figure revenues. Dr. Walsh met me at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport with a small team from the Department of Education, their professional enthusiasm immediately evident as they outlined the agenda for my two-day visit. The schedule included meetings with senior leadership, technical demonstrations for the integration team, and strategic planning sessions about national deployment possibilities. The level of preparation and coordination suggested that my platform had captured attention throughout the federal education hierarchy, not just within Dr. Walsh's immediate department. The Department of Education headquarters occupied an imposing federal building that reinforced the magnitude of what was being discussed. As we entered through security protocols typically reserved for government contractors and high-level consultants, I felt the symbolic weight of transitioning from someone seeking approval to someone whose expertise was being sought by federal decision-makers. The contrast with my family's indifference couldn't have been more pronounced. The first meeting involved presenting my platform's capabilities to a room filled with federal education experts, technology specialists, and policy analysts who understood the challenges my system addressed. Unlike family gatherings where I struggled to explain why my work mattered, this audience immediately grasped the significance of algorithmic matching systems, predictive analytics for student success, and scalable solutions to educational equity problems. Their questions were technical and strategic, rather than polite and superficial. Dr. Patricia Hendricks, the Assistant Secretary for Educational Innovation, led the discussion with the kind of focused attention that comes from recognizing solutions to persistent problems. Ms. Martinez, your platform's approach to holistic student assessment represents a significant advancement over our current federal aid distribution methods. We've been struggling for years to move beyond simple financial need calculations toward more comprehensive evaluations that predict student success and optimize resource allocation. Her observation validated something I had understood intuitively while building the platform, but had never articulated clearly. Traditional scholarship systems treated students as interchangeable recipients of funding based primarily on financial circumstances. My platform recognized that effective educational investment required matching individual students with opportunities that aligned with their academic strengths, career interests, and institutional fit factors that predicted long-term success. The federal partnership we're proposing would allow us to integrate your matching algorithms into our existing aid distribution systems while maintaining your private operations for continued innovation and development, Dr. Hendricks continued. This hybrid approach could transform how we think about educational investment at the national level while preserving the entrepreneurial flexibility that made your platform so effective. The meeting continued for 3 hours with detailed discussions about technical integration challenges, privacy protection protocols, and performance metrics for measuring national impact. The federal team's level of preparation and expertise was remarkable. demonstrating that they had thoroughly analyzed my platform's architecture and understood its potential applications far better than I had initially realized. Their questions pushed me to think strategically about scaling challenges and policy implications that I hadn't previously considered. Most significantly, the federal experts treated me as a peer rather than as a young entrepreneur seeking guidance or approval. They assumed I understood the technical and policy complexities we were discussing, asked for my opinions on implementation strategies, and incorporated my insights into their strategic planning processes. The experience provided a profound contrast to family interactions, where my expertise was acknowledged politely but never engaged seriously. During a brief break between meetings, Dr. Walsh pulled me aside to discuss the personal dynamics of the situation I was navigating. Her own background included building innovative educational programs while managing family expectations that didn't align with her professional trajectory, and she recognized some of the challenges I was experiencing with my family's inability to understand my work's significance. Federal partnerships can be overwhelming even for experienced professionals, she observed. For someone your age, dealing with this level of opportunity while managing family relationships that weren't prepared for your success adds another layer of complexity. Her insight was both comforting and validating, confirming that my emotional challenges weren't just personal limitations, but common experiences for people whose achievements exceeded their family's framework for understanding success. The afternoon. Meetings focused on financial structuring and revenue projections that reinforced the magnitude of what was being offered. Federal analysts had calculated that licensing my platform's technology could generate between $75 and $125 million in cost savings annually through more efficient scholarship distribution and improved student retention rates. The $50 million initial payment represented conservative compensation for technology that could save the federal government substantially more over time. These numbers felt surreal as I processed their implications for my personal circumstances. 6 months ago, I had been a college student whose parents couldn't prioritize her graduation ceremony over a catering event. Now, federal analysts were discussing 8-figure compensation for work I had done alone in my dorm room and apartment. The transformation represented more than financial opportunity. It validated that my instincts about addressing educational access barriers had been remarkably prescient. The day concluded with a dinner hosted by Dr. Hendricks at a Washington restaurant, frequented by federal officials and policy experts. The conversation ranged from technical implementation details to broader discussions about innovation in government, services, and the role of private sector partnerships in addressing systemic social challenges. What struck me most powerfully was how naturally I participated in discussions that would have been completely outside my experience just weeks earlier. The federal officials treated me as someone whose insights were valuable, rather than someone whose potential needed to be developed. They asked for my opinions on policy questions, incorporated my technical expertise into their strategic thinking, and assumed I could contribute meaningfully to complex discussions about national educational priorities. The experience provided a glimpse of what professional respect felt like when it was based on demonstrated competence rather than family connections or social expectations. Back in my hotel room that evening, I called Sarah Chen to process the day's developments. Her excitement about my opportunities was immediately evident, but she also helped me understand the broader implications of what was happening beyond the immediate financial and professional benefits. "You've accidentally become a major player in educational policy," she observed. "The federal partnership means your ideas about scholarship distribution and student support will influence how millions of people access higher education." Her perspective highlighted something I was beginning to understand about the platform I had built. What began as a personal project to address challenges I had experienced navigating financial aid applications had evolved into technology that could reshape how the entire federal system approached educational investment. The work I had done while feeling overlooked by my family had apparently created solutions to problems that affected millions of students and billions of dollars in federal spending. The realization sparked both excitement and responsibility that I was still learning to process. Building a platform to help individual students find scholarships was one thing. Influencing national policy about educational access was something entirely different. The federal partnership represented not just personal validation, but the opportunity to create systemic change that extended far beyond my individual circumstances. As I prepared for the second day of meetings, I reflected on how profoundly my self-perception had shifted over the past week. The graduation ceremony that had felt devastating because of my family's absence now seemed like a minor disappointment compared to the opportunities that were emerging. Their inability to recognize my achievements felt less like personal rejection and more like their limitation in understanding value they hadn't been involved in creating. The second day of Washington meetings focused on implementation timelines and strategic planning for national deployment of my platform's technology. Federal project managers outlined aggressive schedules for integrating my matching algorithms into existing aid distribution systems, while maintaining the innovation capacity that had made my platform successful. The scope and complexity of what they were proposing reinforced that this partnership represented a major federal initiative rather than a simple technology licensing agreement. Dr. Hendricks began the day with an observation that crystallized my understanding of what had attracted federal attention to my work. Traditional government approaches to educational access have focused on removing financial barriers without addressing the equally important challenge of matching students with opportunities where they can succeed. Your platform's holistic approach represents a fundamental shift toward investment strategies that optimize outcomes rather than simply distributing resources. Her analysis helped me understand why federal experts viewed my platform as innovative, despite my perception that I had simply been solving obvious problems through straightforward technical approaches. Government systems had been constrained by regulatory requirements that prioritized fairness and consistency over effectiveness and personalization. My platform had been designed from the beginning to optimize individual outcomes, which required algorithmic sophistication that federal systems hadn't previously incorporated. The technical integration discussions revealed the full scope of what the partnership would involve. Federal programmers had already begun developing interface protocols that would allow my matching algorithms to work within existing government databases while maintaining the privacy protections and user experience features that had made my platform successful. The level of preparation and technical sophistication demonstrated that this partnership had been under development for months rather than weeks. During a lunch break, I received a call from Carlos asking about my Washington trip and expressing surprise that my computer project had attracted government attention. His tone carried the same polite interest he used when discussing topics outside his expertise, suggesting that he still didn't understand the significance of what was developing. When I mentioned that the federal partnership involved substantial compensation, his attention sharpened immediately in ways that felt both validating and somewhat disappointing. "How substantial are we talking about?" Carlos asked, his voice shifting to the focused attention he typically reserved for major construction contracts. When I mentioned the $50 million figure, the silence that followed was longer than any pause in our previous conversations. "Sophia, are you serious? $50 million for your scholarship website?" The incredulity in his voice captured perfectly how my family had been thinking about my work compared to its actual value and impact. "It's not just a website, Carlos," I replied, feeling both patient and exasperated. "It's a comprehensive platform that uses machine learning algorithms to match students with scholarship opportunities, provides mentorship networks, and has facilitated over $12 million in educational funding with retention rates that far exceed national averages. The federal government wants to license the technology for national deployment because it addresses problems their existing systems haven't been able to solve." The explanation seemed to overwhelm him, suggesting that the gap between my family's perception and reality was even larger than I had realized. Their framework for understanding my work had been so limited that even hearing the financial figures didn't immediately help them grasp what I had actually accomplished. The disconnect reinforced my growing conviction that their approval, while still meaningful to me personally, was no longer essential for my professional confidence or strategic direction. The afternoon meetings in Washington concluded with preliminary agreement on partnership terms that exceeded even the initial $50 million offer. Federal analysts had calculated that my platform's implementation could generate savings and improved outcomes worth substantially more than originally projected, leading to enhanced compensation packages that included ongoing revenue sharing and expansion opportunities. The final figures being discussed represented generational wealth that would transform not just my circumstances, but my family's financial situation for decades to come. As I prepared to return to California, Dr. Hendricks offered a final observation that helped me understand the broader significance of what had developed. Ms. Martinez, partnerships like this are extremely rare, particularly for someone at your career stage. The federal government doesn't typically pursue licensing agreements with individual innovators unless their work addresses critical national priorities in ways that established systems cannot. Your platform represents exactly the kind of technological innovation that can transform how government serves citizens more effectively. Her words reinforced that the federal partnership represented far more than personal financial opportunity. It validated that the work I had done while feeling overlooked by my family had created genuine value for millions of students and represented innovative approaches to systemic social challenges. The recognition felt more meaningful than any family celebration could have been, because it was based on measurable impact rather than family obligation or social expectation. The flight back to California provided time to process the magnitude of what had been accomplished and what lay ahead. In less than 2 weeks, I had transitioned from being a graduating student whose family couldn't attend her ceremony to being a federal partner whose technology would influence educational access for millions of Americans. The transformation felt both surreal and entirely natural, as if I had finally found contexts where my actual capabilities were recognized and valued appropriately. As the plane descended toward San Francisco, I made a decision about how to handle the family dynamics that awaited me. Rather than seeking their validation or trying to educate them about what I had accomplished, I would simply inform them about the federal partnership and allow their response to reveal their true capacity for recognizing and celebrating achievements they hadn't been involved in creating. Their reaction would determine the future terms of our relationship, rather than my need for their approval continuing to shape my emotional well-being. The decision felt liberating in ways I hadn't anticipated. For years, I had been seeking their recognition while building something remarkable without their support or understanding. Now I had federal validation that my work addressed critical national priorities and generated 8-figure value, making their opinion significant, but no longer essential for my sense of professional worth or personal direction. The partnership represented independence from family approval in ways that felt both exciting and somewhat sad. Landing in San Francisco, I felt genuinely optimistic about the future for the first time in memory. Not because I had finally earned my family's attention, but because I had discovered that their attention was no longer necessary for my sense of purpose or professional trajectory. The platform I had built had created its own momentum and meaning, providing a foundation for impact that extended far beyond personal validation into genuine contribution to educational equity and opportunity for millions of students who faced similar barriers to those I had experienced growing up in a family that loved me but had never learned how to recognize the significance of what I was actually capable of accomplishing. Returning to Newport Beach felt like entering a time capsule where my family continued operating within their established patterns, completely unaware that their youngest daughter had just negotiated a federal partnership that would be announced on national news within 48 hours. The contrast between Washington's high-stakes policy discussions and my childhood bedroom's unchanged decorations from high school highlighted how dramatically my circumstances had evolved, while my family's perception remained frozen in outdated assumptions about my capabilities and achievements. Patricia Martinez greeted me at the front door, with the effusive enthusiasm she typically reserved for major catering clients. Her excitement about my return clearly genuine, even if her understanding of what I had accomplished in Washington remained superficial. "Mija, you look so professional. Tell us everything about your government meetings. Your father is dying to hear about your computer project getting federal attention." Her word choice revealed how completely she had missed the significance of what was developing, treating a $50 million partnership as if I had received encouragement from a local government office. The family dinner that evening unfolded with familiar dynamics that now felt both comforting and limiting. Roberto Martinez dominated the conversation with updates about a major commercial development project that could expand Martinez construction into luxury resort properties. Carlos shared news about securing contracts for 3 high-end residential developments that would establish their company as the premier builder for Orange County's affluent communities. Maria contributed updates about her children's private school achievements and her husband's promotion to partner at his law firm. When conversation finally turned to my Washington experience, their attention felt perfunctory rather than genuinely curious about the substance of what had occurred. Patricia asked whether I had enjoyed seeing the Capitol. Roberto wondered if government work might provide steady employment opportunities, and Carlos inquired whether my platform might help Martinez Construction connect with minority business development programs. Their questions revealed how thoroughly they had missed the magnitude of what the federal partnership actually represented. The meetings went extremely well, I began carefully, testing whether they would engage with details or remain satisfied with surface-level reassurance. The Department of Education wants to license my platform's technology for national deployment because it addresses critical problems with how federal financial aid is currently distributed to students. The explanation was designed to provide substantive information while using language they might find accessible rather than overwhelming. Roberto nodded approvingly, clearly pleased that his daughter's work had attracted positive attention from authority figures, though his response suggested he imagined something equivalent to a government consulting contract rather than a transformative partnership worth 8 figures. "That's wonderful, Mija. Government contracts can be very stable, and it sounds like your computer skills are finally getting the recognition they deserve." The phrase, "finally getting recognition," sparked something complex in my chest, highlighting how my family viewed my federal partnership as external validation for work they had never taken seriously, rather than understanding it as evidence that their assessment of my capabilities had been fundamentally inadequate. They were pleased that others recognized my value without recognizing their own failure to appreciate what I had been building under their noses for years. Carlos leaned forward with the focused attention he used when discussing potential business opportunities. "Soph, this government connection could be incredibly valuable for the family businesses. Do you think your contacts might help us navigate federal contracting requirements for some of the larger construction projects we're pursuing?" His immediate attempt to leverage my federal relationships for Martinez Construction's benefit was both predictable and revealing about how he conceptualized my achievements as resources for family advantage rather than independent accomplishments. "Actually," I replied, feeling a moment of anticipation for what I was about to reveal, "the partnership involves significantly more than consulting or networking opportunities. The Department of Education is offering $50 million to license my platform's core technology, with ongoing revenue sharing that could generate substantially more over time as the system scales nationally." The silence that followed was profound enough that I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the adjacent living room. Roberto's fork paused halfway to his mouth, his expression shifting through confusion, disbelief, and dawning comprehension. Patricia's hand moved to her chest in the gesture she used when receiving shocking news, while Carlos simply stared at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language he was still trying to translate. $50 million? Patricia finally whispered, her voice carrying the same tone she might use to discuss natural disasters or lottery winnings. "Sophia, sweetheart, are you certain you understood correctly? That seems like such an enormous amount for computer work." Her response captured perfectly how my family had been thinking about my platform, as if substantial compensation for technology solutions was inherently implausible, rather than reflecting the actual value I had created. Roberto recovered first, his business instincts engaging as he attempted to process information that didn't fit his framework for understanding his daughter's capabilities. "Mija, you're talking about more money than our construction company. Generates in multiple years. What exactly did you build that's worth that much to the federal government?" The question revealed both his struggle to reconcile my achievement with his perception of my work and his genuine desire to understand what he had apparently missed about my platform's significance. The conversation that followed lasted nearly 3 hours as I explained the technical architecture, impact metrics, and policy implications that had attracted federal attention to my work. What emerged was a family portrait of people who loved me, but had been so focused on their established business patterns that they had completely failed to recognize when their youngest daughter was building something that addressed national priorities and generated 8-figure valuations. Carlos asked increasingly sophisticated questions as he began to grasp the scope of what I had accomplished, his initial skepticism transforming into something approaching awe, mixed with confusion about how he had missed such significant developments. "Soph, you're telling me that while we were discussing your future career plans and suggesting you might want to join one of the family businesses, you had already built something worth more than both our companies combined?" The question highlighted the fundamental disconnect that had shaped our family dynamics throughout my college years. While they had been operating under the assumption that I needed their guidance and support to achieve professional success, I had been independently creating solutions to problems they didn't understand, using skills they had never taken seriously. Their concern about my future had been misplaced because I had already secured a future that exceeded their most optimistic projections. Maria, who had remained quiet throughout most of the technical explanations, finally spoke with the directness that characterized her approach to family situations. "Sophia, I think we need to acknowledge that we've been treating you like a child who needed career guidance when you were actually building something incredible that none of us understood or appreciated. We missed something really important about who you are and what you're capable of." Her observations sparked a moment of genuine family reflection that felt both overdue and somewhat healing. For the first time in memory, they were recognizing not just my specific achievement, but their broader pattern of underestimating my capabilities and dismissing work they hadn't taken time to understand properly. The acknowledgement didn't erase years of feeling overlooked, but it provided a foundation for rebuilding family relationships on more accurate assessments of each other's strengths and contributions. Patricia wiped tears from her eyes as she processed the implications of what she was learning about her youngest daughter's accomplishments. "Mija, I'm so proud of what you've built, but I'm also sorry that we didn't see it sooner. We've been so focused on our own businesses that we missed how remarkable your work had become. You did something incredible while we were worrying about whether you'd be successful." The evening concluded with plans for a proper celebration that would acknowledge the magnitude of what I had accomplished, though I insisted we wait until the federal partnership was announced publicly before involving extended family and friends. The Department of Education had scheduled a press conference for the following week to highlight innovative public-private partnerships that were transforming educational access, and my platform would be featured as a primary example of how technology could address systemic challenges more effectively than traditional government approaches. The press conference took place in the Department of Education's main briefing room, with federal officials, education policy experts, and technology journalists in attendance. Dr. Hendricks introduced the partnership as a model for how government could leverage private sector innovation to serve citizens more effectively while maintaining public accountability and accessibility. The announcement generated immediate media attention, with coverage appearing on major news networks within hours of the briefing. What I hadn't anticipated was how quickly the story would gain national prominence, or how dramatically it would transform public perception of my work and its implications. By evening, my platform was being discussed on CNN, NPR, and the major network news programs as an example of how young entrepreneurs were addressing social challenges through innovative technology. The coverage emphasized both the financial scope of the partnership and the potential impact on educational access for millions of students. The media attention intensified over the following days, as education reporters and policy analysts explored the broader implications of the partnership for federal approaches to social services and technology integration. Opinion pieces appeared in major newspapers discussing whether my platform represented a new model for government innovation or raised concerns about privatizing essential public services. The debate was sophisticated and substantive, treating my work as a serious contribution to national policy discussions rather than just an impressive individual achievement. What struck me most powerfully was how the national coverage treated me as a credible expert whose insights were valuable for understanding broader challenges in educational access and government innovation. Journalists sought my opinions on policy questions, included my analysis in their reporting, and positioned me as someone whose perspective contributed meaningfully to complex debates about technology's role in social services. The recognition provided external validation that my work had significance beyond personal achievement. My parents watched the coverage with expressions that cycled through pride, amazement, and continued disbelief that their youngest daughter had become a national figure in educational policy. Roberto called me after watching my interview on the morning news programs, his voice carrying an emotional weight I had rarely heard before. "Mija, seeing you talk about your work on television made me realize how much we missed about what you were doing. You're discussing policy implications that are completely outside our experience, and you sound like you belong in those conversations." His observation was both accurate and emotionally significant because it represented recognition that I had developed expertise in areas where he couldn't provide guidance or evaluation. For years, our family dynamics had assumed that his business experience qualified him to assess my potential and provide career direction. The federal partnership and media coverage had demonstrated that I had built competence in domains where his expertise wasn't relevant, requiring him to reassess fundamental assumptions about our respective capabilities and knowledge. The financial implications of the partnership began to manifest as legal teams finalized the licensing agreements and revenue-sharing structures. The initial $50 million payment was substantial enough to provide generational wealth, but the ongoing compensation tied to platform usage and expansion created potential for earnings that could dwarf that initial figure over time. Federal projections suggested that successful national deployment could generate hundreds of millions in revenue sharing over the partnership's term. These numbers felt surreal as I processed their implications for my family's circumstances and my own future options. 6 months earlier, I had been a college student whose parents couldn't prioritize her graduation ceremony over a catering event. Now, I had financial resources that exceeded my family's combined business assets and professional recognition that placed me among the youngest people ever to partner with federal agencies on major policy initiatives. The transformation was both thrilling and somewhat disorienting as I navigated the practical challenges of managing sudden wealth and national attention while maintaining focus on the educational mission that had motivated my platform's development. From the beginning, the money and recognition were meaningful, but they were secondary to the opportunity to create systematic change in how millions of students accessed higher education funding and support networks. Carlos called me a week after the press conference to discuss something that had been weighing on his mind since learning about the partnership's scope and significance. "Soph, I've been thinking about how differently we would have treated your work if we had understood what you were building. I'm wondering if there are other things about you that we've missed because we were looking through the wrong lens." His reflection suggested a broader family reassessment that extended beyond my specific achievements to questions about how well they understood each other's capabilities and interests. The conversation that followed was more substantive than any we had shared since childhood, covering topics ranging from my long-term goals for the platform to his own questions about whether the family businesses were positioned to adapt to technological changes that might affect construction and catering industries. For the first time, he was seeking my insights rather than offering guidance, recognizing that my expertise in certain areas exceeded his own experience and knowledge. Maria organized a family celebration that reflected the magnitude of what I had accomplished while acknowledging their previous failure to recognize my work's significance. Unlike typical Martinez family gatherings that focused on social networking and business relationship building, this event was designed specifically to honor my achievements and provide opportunity for extended family and friends to understand what I had built and why it mattered for educational access nationally. The celebration included presentations about my platform's impact metrics, demonstrations of how the matching algorithms worked, and discussions about the policy implications of public-private partnerships in education. What struck me most powerfully was how engaged the attendees were with the substantive aspects of my work, rather than just celebrating the financial success or media attention. People asked technical questions, shared stories about their own challenges with educational funding, and discussed how similar approaches might address other social service delivery problems. Dr. Walsh attended the celebration as my guest, providing federal perspective on the partnership's broader significance and implications for government innovation. Her presence added credibility to the event, while reinforcing how substantially my professional context had expanded beyond anything my family had previously experienced. She spoke about my platform's potential to influence national education policy and serve as a model for technology integration across multiple federal agencies. The evening concluded with Roberto offering a toast that captured his evolving understanding of what I had accomplished and what it meant for family relationships moving forward. To Sophia, who built something remarkable while we were looking in the wrong direction. We're proud of what you've achieved, but more importantly, we're grateful for the reminder that we still have a lot to learn about recognizing excellence when it's happening right in front of us. His words acknowledged both my specific achievement and their broader pattern of underestimating my capabilities, providing a foundation for family relationships based on more accurate understanding of each other's strengths and expertise. The recognition felt healing in ways I hadn't expected, not because it validated my need for family approval, but because it suggested they were capable of growth and reassessment when presented with undeniable evidence of their misconceptions. 6 months later, my platform had successfully integrated with federal aid distribution systems and was serving over 2 million students nationwide. The impact metrics exceeded all projections, with student retention rates, scholarship distribution, efficiency, and mentor engagement statistics that validated the policy innovations the partnership represented. The success attracted international attention, with education ministers from multiple countries requesting consultations about adapting similar approaches for their national systems. The revenue sharing from federal deployment had already generated substantial additional compensation beyond the initial $50 million licensing fee, with projections suggesting continued growth as the platform scaled to serve more students and expanded into additional federal programs. The financial success provided resources for establishing a foundation focused on educational equity research and program development, creating sustainable mechanisms for continued innovation in the field. Most significantly, the platform's success had transformed my relationship with family approval from essential validation to appreciated support. Their pride in my achievements was meaningful, but it was no longer necessary for my professional confidence or personal satisfaction. I had built something that commanded respect based on measurable impact rather than family connection, providing a foundation for relationships based on mutual appreciation rather than hierarchical approval dynamics. The journey from overlooked daughter to federal partner had taught me that the most meaningful recognition comes from people who understand the significance of your work rather than from family members who love you but fail to comprehend what you're actually accomplishing. The Department of Education's partnership offer had provided validation that my instincts about addressing educational access barriers had been remarkably prescient, while my family's eventual recognition provided healing without dependence. Looking back at my graduation ceremony, sitting alone while my family prioritized business obligations over my academic achievements. I could see how that moment of isolation had been necessary preparation for building something that transcended their approval and created value for millions of people facing similar barriers to educational opportunity. The platform that emerged from personal frustration had become a systematic solution to national challenges, proving that individual experiences could generate innovations with far-reaching social impact. The woman who had walked across that Stanford stage alone had been preparing for independence she didn't yet recognize she needed, while the platform she had built during college had been developing into technology that would reshape national approaches to educational access and opportunity. The transformation from seeking family validation to commanding federal recognition had required recognizing that her expertise extended far beyond their framework for understanding value and significance. As I prepared for expansion into international markets and additional federal partnerships, I reflected on how profoundly my perspective had shifted from the graduation day that had felt devastating because of family absence to a present where their support was appreciated, but not essential. For professional direction or personal satisfaction, the $50 million partnership had provided external validation that made their recognition meaningful but not necessary, creating freedom to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than hierarchical approval needs. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.